Hello folks, Michael here.
And Rupert here. We're the Prehistory guys, delighted to be continuing the Calanais conversations. And today we're talking with Professor Duncan Garrow of University of Reading, who is, along with colleague Fraser Sturt, involved in some fascinating work on Lewis.
Yes, namely excavating and indeed diving on a Neolithic Crannog, not very far from the stones of Calanais themselves.
So what is a Crannog? Well, probably best hear that from the expert. So let's not waste any time. Let's say hello to our guest.
So, Duncan, welcome. It's so fantastic to hear you're back up on Lewis to excavate one of the Neolithic Crannogs that are dotted about the lochs here as part of your Islands of Stone project. Tell us about the project and what you hope to achieve, and not least of all, what is a Crannog anyway?
So a Crannog is really an artificial island in a loch. It's as simple as that, but it's got an exciting name, a catchy name. And myself and Fraser Sturt have been working, as you guys know, on Crannogs in the Outer Hebrides, and specifically we've been focusing on Lewis so far, because Chris Murray, a local diver who subsequently worked with Mark Elliott, has basically found a lot of Neolithic pottery in association with Crannogs in Lewis, because that's where he lives. And we've been trying to follow up on the work that Chris and Mark did by surveying them. And this summer we've been doing our first kind of major excavation, which has been really exciting.
That's great.
So, how old are the Crannogs?
Sorry, what does that?
How old are the Crannogs?
Yeah, so these are about 5,500 years old.
Right.
So that's great. A bit older than Calanais, as we're going to be on Calanais website.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So how have they been found?
Some of them are known about already, but obviously not the age of them. So the one that we're working on is on the Ordnance Survey map as a cairn. So they're kind of known about in the local area as something that was there. But the Neolithic aspect of them was uncovered by Chris Murray, diving them with his friend Mark Elliott.
So roughly how many do you think there are in the Outer Hebrides? Do you know?
Well,
and are they you mentioned Lewis and North Uist. So are they just there, or are they more widespread as well?
So that's what we're trying to find out on our project, which is the Islands of Stone project funded by the AHRC. And we think it's very likely that there are Neolithic Crannogs all across the Outer Hebrides, quite numerous. But we need to find stuff to demonstrate that, don't we? Rather than just think it. So one was excavated in the 1980s by Ian Armitt and his team, and that was in North Uist, Island Dommel. And then everyone thought there might be more, and none turned up until Chris did his work. And all of the ones that Chris has found are in the Isle of Lewis. So our project, and Steph Blankshine, who's the postdoctoral researcher on it, has been doing loads of work basically trying to find out more through satellite imaging, and also searching through old archaeological records for finds that might give us a clue about some of them being Neolithic rather than later in date, which they usually are.
Right.
So the ones that you've looked at so far, I mean, they seem really small. What do you think went on there? What were they being used for? I mean, do you think people actually lived on them? And, if not, where do they actually live?
So that's a really good question. And one of the main questions we're trying to resolve, I guess. So they are really small. The one that we're working on at the moment is about 12 meters across above the water, right. So pretty small. But the work that we've been doing over the past few weeks, we've literally been backfilling the trench today, has revealed a quite an extensive timber structure going out on the underwater archaeology. So the team that Fraser's been leading extends way beyond the stone circumference of the site.
Oh, right.
So we're now thinking maybe that early phase is big, and that's something we need to resolve in the future.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I think in many people's eyes, if they've heard the word Crannog, they associate it with a timber structure, with a timber dwelling out on stilts rather than an island of sorts. Yeah,
and
that's
perhaps
really
the one, what we've been finding out is that maybe the original phase of the Neolithic one we've been looking at the moment was like that exactly, Michael.
Yeah.
Well, we've heard whispers that one theory is that these are feasting sites with people coming from as far away as Orkney to join in festivities. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I didn't really get into what they were for, did I? In answer to your previous question, which is always a good sidestep to make. But yeah, absolutely. I don't. It's possible that they were living on them, especially in the wooden phase of the one that we're looking at. But otherwise, they seem too small. There's very little material on the stone islands themselves. And Chris and subsequently we have found loads of pots broken in the lochs around them. So one idea is that people might have been coming to them to have a big party, basically. And part of that party was throwing the pots into the loch around them. And I think that's a good theory. We haven't quite proved it, but I think it's definitely one of the best ideas about what they were for, at least some of them so far. We haven't got any direct evidence that they're coming from Orkney, but with the Orkney, they do have Unston Bowl pottery, which is shared with Orkney, so there's definitely some kind of links there at the very least. Absolutely.
Interesting.
So how, if at all, do you reckon these sites might relate to Calanais at all?
Yeah, so
is there a link?
We're working in essentially the same landscape. It took me 15 minutes to drive. I'm talking to you in Calanais at the moment, and it's 15 minutes drive from site. So just 7 miles or something like that. And I think that our sites are providing an important context because they're, say, 300, 400, 500 years older than Calanais. And it's really interesting to think about these kind of places that acted as a focal point for a community, where you're certainly creating very large stone structures, even if it's quite a different kind of stone structure to Calanais. And then perhaps you know, in a way, our sites have insight, as we were just discussing, about the kind of ceremonial activities that might have gone on there in a way that you don't necessarily straightforwardly have the evidence for at Calanais. So both kinds of site can help us understand the other one, if you see what I mean.
Oh, that would be fascinating going forward. Yes.
Well,
we need all the help we can get. Don't we?
Yeah.
Well, we have to ask, midges. Do you think folks use these sites in lochs to get away from midges? I mean, they are a nightmare up there.
Yeah. The brief answer, having experienced some midges in the last few weeks, is no, because it's normally fine because only a little breeze will get rid of the midges, and most of the time. But we've had some a couple of very still days, and it was hard with the midges. But I can tell you scientific evidence of my experience that the midges were just as bad on the island where I was mainly digging as they were back at the shore where I had my tea breaks.
Right.
So I didn't do any scientific counting of them, but in my subjective opinion, they were just as bad in both places. So I'm not sure that theory quite works, but I think further, midge tests are required.
Yeah. Well, from a scientific point of view, obviously that seems to be settled. Theory disproven.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, quite.
But about the field work itself, how long do you expect to be working there? Are people allowed to visit?
We've been working. We're approaching the end of the excavation. So in terms of the excavation, There's not very much to see anymore, which is a shame. We've had a few visitors, but not loads. It's been a bit tricky because of COVID, so we haven't had our normal, very open approach to people visiting. So we've just wanted to keep the numbers down and things like that.
But it seems to me a bit of a mystery, the whole idea of working on a crannog or excavating a crannog. What does your daily routine consist of?
Yeah, so we're all working as a team. But sometimes you might get the impression that there is an underwater team and an on-land team on site. Not that we ever have disharmony, of course, but that is seriously what happens, because there's only a few people that are skilled divers, and then people like me that just can dig holes on land without any complicated scuba equipment. It's been great because we've literally had one trench that goes from across the Crannog and then down into the water, essentially the same trench.
Right.
So that's been really nice, and we always, that is kind of a metaphor for the excavation. We're trying to understand that site through underwater and on land excavation. And the different teams work in obviously very different ways, and we have our own pace. But it's really nice to watch. We're on land watching the divers just off the edge of the Crannog doing their thing.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And we've all had a chance to go and snorkel, because it's so shallow that you can actually see what's going on with a snorkel. So to see lovely timbers, things like that has been great.
Fantastic. I'm so glad I asked. But what going forward? What will you be doing with the results of the work, and how will the world get to find out about it?
We've got a couple more seasons of field work left in the project. So one of those is going to be looking for more of these kinds of sites. Probably further down south in Uist, because as we said before, we know there's quite a few in Lewis, and we need to find a few more in Uist. So that'll be more survey and lots of diving, and then another year we've got another year of excavation, which we need to decide whether we're going to do another month at the site we're on at the moment at Bhorgastail, or cash in our chips and do another site somewhere else. Okay. So that's a difficult decision, but we'll be making it at some point. We'll be doing the normal excavation monograph and that kind of thing, but that won't be out for a while. So people should check out the website, which is crannogs.soton.ac.uk, which is Southampton, and they can find out more that way.
Fantastic.
Terrific.
Well, Duncan, thank you so much for joining us today, and really, best of luck with the rest of the excavations, and we're really looking forward to seeing the results in due course.
Thank you for inviting me along.
Great to talk to you.
All right.
Bye.
Take good care.
Bye.
See you.